Everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and I bet you all old school World of Tanks players never saw this day coming. The day when the VK4502A was actually worth playing inside the game. This vehicle gave people a lot of pain on towards the mouse. It was originally the German line. You'd go VK4502A, VK4502B, and then you'd go mouse. These days, however, the vehicle leads up towards the Panzer VII, so a lot of people at least didn't really have to suffer through this one, as they've got a whole new line of mouse-like tanks to be able to enjoy at Tier 8 and Tier 9 to be able to get there. However, for a lot of people back in the day when this thing was very much underpowered, this was an absolute block up the German super heavy line. However, a couple of patches ago, Wargaming decided to buff this vehicle, and for all of the times that I critique Wargaming for when they've poorly balanced vehicles, I'm looking at you, Turtle, I'd also like to give respect to them when they've made adjustments to tanks like this that clearly were underpowered to actually make them enjoyable and playable in the game. It's very important that Wargaming try to address these areas of the tech tree where you get a lot of player drop-off because like new players, a lot of new players want to play German tanks. They want to get up towards the mouse. Idiots like me recommend you go for the mouse because it's one of the most fun tanks you can play inside the game, right? So for a new player making their way up, they reach the VK4502A, and before the update, they'd go, oh my word, what's all this? All these Tier 8 premium tanks farming me left, right, and center. And while they probably are still going to get farmed left, right, and center, at least they're going to get farmed a little bit slower, or maybe put in at least one more shot or so. Or at least have a chance to not just be a big sack of experience for the enemy team, right? So what did Wargaming exactly do to the VK4502A? Well, they improved the rate of fire of the vehicle. The damage per minute is now 2,159, up from 1,900 exactly. Also, they buffed the accuracy of the vehicle from 0.37 base to 0.35 base. They also improved the aim time from 2.3 seconds to 2 seconds. They also improved the dispersion values when you're moving by about 10%. And on top of that, they improved the hit points by 30, but more importantly, the turret armor went from 185 at the front. Everybody could manage to go through this turret easily, even with standard rounds, let alone gold rounds. And they buffed it up to a whopping 255. And the statistics of this vehicle, they've been massively improved, but the actual win rate of the vehicle has still stayed within a healthy region. It hasn't been like an M6, for example, which is now all I really seem to meet at Tier 6 heavy, with like the stats of a Tier 8 medium, just with poor mobility, and that's it down at Tier 6. Outrageous how good the M6 is. However, the VK has been done right. Its win ratio is better than it was, while still not being overpowered. And I like the approach by Wargaming to be a little bit more controlled in the measure with a vehicle like this, because it now feels like it's actually worth playing. So I decided to pick one up on my free-to-play account when they managed to buff it, and while it was still painful to play when stock, when I finally got this top turret, when I finally got this top gun, boy did it start to feel good. So yeah, if you didn't notice, this is my Plays for Free account. It's an account that I never spend any money on at all in any way, and never use any premium consumables, so I can still get an idea of how I hope maybe the majority of players still play this game. Although as the years go on, it feels like the amount of players who actually play this game free are less and less and less. And to be fair, Wargaming are making some really good changes to the game, with the Battle Pass, for example, giving so many free premium days and lots of events, Twitch drops, and so on and so forth. So really, I feel like I actually play with a premium account more than I don't play with a premium account on my free-to-play account, even though I'm not actually paying anything. Ooh, pressure moment here. I've not got gold loaded, and I don't have intuition to be able to switch the shell to a gold round there for the T10, but luckily it's still able to go in. And the Peregrine bounces off our newly buffed turret armor, or maybe possibly the hull. But of course, now when this thing isn't just an absolute pushover with regards to its armor, boy does it feel good. So we're able to get back to base, we're able to destroy the higher tier heavy, we're able to take it to the premium heavy as well, and just have the damage per minute to not be this pinata for the enemy team. So as I said, oh, nice clutch. Well, not really clutch, really. It was just kind of like auto-aim and let RNG sort it out, right? But this was the first game that I played in this vehicle when I finally got it fully upgraded. And I can tell you, this tank is no pushover now. If you're a good player and you know how to play this thing offensively, and know how to side scrape and don't expose your lower plate. But you still got to be careful, however, because I believe the top of the turret is still overmatchable by 121mm caliber guns. So if you're fighting this thing, you can't just shoot through the turret front now, but if you've got a large caliber gun, you can still overmatch the forehead of this vehicle. So be careful with that when you're playing. So we're actually going to load an HE round there to do 444 damage against the Scorpion G. And that's quite a nice roll because the average damage on the HE is 420, so I'm happy with that. And that is ultimate free to play. We've only fired standard rounds. We're even loading HE instead of loading the gold, up to 4,000 damage now, and only when we've run out of our regular ammunition is we're going to start to fire gold. So now we're creating a plan here. Conqueror says, good job with that even. Go together. And I say, double track him. He has no durability. So I see that the char tracks him once. I actually fail my shot, and that's going to be very costly. If I hit that, I would have got 1,800 tracking there. I'm still going to get a little bit at the end, but a bit of a misplay there by me at the end to miss the tracks. But it's very important when you see tank destroyers that aren't boosting their hit points, that they have quite vulnerable tracks. Also, if they haven't gained any extra hit points from other field mods, you can tell that they might not even have the second field mod that you get that boosts their track health as well. So if you see that, track a tank destroyer twice, and it'll be like you're playing the game in 2015 when everyone couldn't drive around like idiots. So a sweet game here for the VK4502A. It was a real feels good one to pick up 5,600 combined in the first non-stock game in the vehicle. And this was the result isn't incredible, but however, I can tell you that if this tank hadn't been buffed, and if I had been stock, I think this game would have been a loss. I really doubt that I could have been able to have so much of an impact, and with the game being so close at the end with only 3,000 hit points left on our team, boy was it satisfying to finally make the difference in a vehicle which I think it's been painful for many years. However, we are not free to play anymore. We're playing on our main account in the VK4502A, and the gloves are off. This time, not such a much nicer matchup than we even had on the free-to-play account. So, looking forward to see what we can do in the VK4502A in its new form. So, I want to talk about the new Stajanki map. I think, all in all, I'd say it's an improvement, although I do not like how Wargaming seemed to be making maps, turbo. I think that previously, the way that the South worked is it was the tanks that had the confidence to take the dip that ended up winning the engagement there. However, now it does feel as if you take the dip early, that you're not even safe, because lots of vehicles can actually slinky in towards this part and this part without getting spotted, without getting shot from the north, without getting contested from, say, your support fire. And so even if you've got into the dip early, previously on Stajanki, it did feel as if then, if anyone wanted to come and rush into the dip, that they had to drive through a little no man's land, and then they'd lose a lot of hit points doing so, and then hopefully you could win the one-on-one fight inside the dip. Now it feels like it's whoever sends more vehicles towards the south that really wins the engagement. When Wargaming create these trenches that allow players to be able to get towards what was previously choke points safely, it's not a case of being fast enough to take the choke point. It is now just a case of how many vehicles you send. So I'm not really enjoying that. Also, I'd like to highlight, did you see how dodgy Wargaming's outlines are here for that spoil heap in front of me? Notice how, I'll pause it the next time we get round, but notice how Wargaming's outline systems are really dodgy sometimes. You see this, how it looks like the spoil heap should be like this, but it's actually not the case. The actual ridgeline is here. So I think I'm going to miss one, maybe even two shots in this replay from that. So be careful. While the outlines are very useful, and they're sometimes correct, there are still issues. And I wonder if that's because in that position, Wargaming didn't update the modeling when they changed the corner. It looks like they've actually made the corner taller to make it easier for, should we say, taller tanks to be able to hide themselves. Whereas previously, I think the slope was smaller. But I'd have to go and take a look at an old version of Stajanki to be able to prove that. And considering how much this, should we say, the factory area of this map has changed, it definitely doesn't feel like the case. And you can still see that I'm getting confused with that ridgeline against these two players. It really shows you how dependent you can become on the outlining of the game to be able to decide about when you're taking your shots or where you're trying to make your plays. So we're bouncing gold rounds from premium tanks here from the Obsidian, from the 703-2. The IS, even though they got 2 marks of excellence, decided they wanted to try and make a push play. I think it's kind of valiant because they are losing the south, and if they don't win the north, they're not going to really do much in the game. But when you're playing against a VK4502A, and while it doesn't have the best of penetration on its standard rounds at only 200, and not the best on its premium rounds at 244, it can still be pretty darn brutal. Talk about premium rounds, looks like I'm loading the gold here after bouncing one too many rounds off the BZ. However, with that shot now going into the ridgeline once again, come on, Wargaming, fix your modeling out. But yeah, it's definitely worth watching out for that corner. Oh, come on, I don't want to be bouncing that many gold shells off the BZ-58. Anyway, I digress. Let's focus back on what I was saying. So now it just feels like the south is who sends the most amount of tanks there. I don't really feel like the north is still pushable. And so my firm recommendation to all of you still on Stajunki is to play aggressively towards the south unless you're in some kind of like super heavy, slow, trundling heavy tank. Or alternatively, if you're in a vehicle that just has, it's quite slow and it has very poor view range as well. So this guard is now wanting to make a play across the north, again, because it seems like they're losing the south. And this game is still neck and neck. We're pretty much even on hit points, although we are up with 3 guns in the game. I tell the Comet that I'm going to help them, just to keep them happy and make sure they just know to just keep kiting and not panic in this scenario. And there we go. We finish off the guard, and we can turn our attention back towards the MIL 1951. We're also bouncing the VK3002D. And just this all-round armor upgrade on this vehicle is pretty cool. We're up to 2,400 damage blocked, and this thing definitely feels like it can side scrape now. Now, sure, don't get me wrong, I'm in a nice matchup, and I'm in a nice matchup where not everybody's firing gold, but still, every little helps, and you do get yourselves into these scenarios, at least occasionally. Again, bouncing regular rounds, we're going to switch to the gold to see if we can go through the KV3 turrets. The KV3's turret instead. And a shout out to that Comet. That Comet actually went out of their way afterwards to say thank you to us. It's always a real feels-good moment when people are actually using the communication features inside World of Tanks to say thanks to people who try to look out for them. And that's one of my biggest recommendations for players. If you're looking for another element to add to your game, consider getting better at communication. You can either hold your Z key to bring up a communication wheel, or alternatively, I've just learned which F keys say what. So for example, for me, I believe thank you is F4. I've got kind of like fallback on F3, but that's actually old school default and it might be different for you now. Definitely make use of them. And I found that not only can it get players on your side, but also if you make them aware of your actions, then they can be able to base what they're going to do with that communication. It's exactly what you should do, right, in that scenario. So we're just continuing clapping, and I have to admit, when I looked that there was still 6,000 hit points left on the enemy team, and I was up to 6,000 combined here, I was thinking this is going to be a big game. So clearly the Eagle is AFK, so instead I'm going to focus on the Emil. Don't have to worry about that Eagle. I'll let my team deal with them, but I was also worried about that SU 1:30 PM jamming me in the side. Luckily, we're gonna miss the Emil, go back towards the Eagle, and it looks like the T-34-2 didn't really care about shooting the AFK tank like I did in that scenario. Finishes off the AFK, I take a hit from the Lorraine, angle my turret towards them, so hopefully we've got a better chance of being able to ricochet them. There we go, right off the side of the turret. I'm going to ping the map as to where the Lorraine is, hopefully get just above, and slam a gold round through the side of their vehicle. Now we've only got 6 APCR rounds left, but luckily we're actually spotting that Lorraine there. And now we're up to, what is that? Is that 8,000 combined? That is outrageous for a tier 8 tank. But you know, with this thing being buffed, look, I don't think this thing is now outrageously OP. It's not what I'm trying to suggest. Was that an HE round that I put in through the back of the SU? I don't think this thing is outrageously overpowered, but boy, does it feel good to actually now not feel that you're just feeding your opponents in a vehicle like this. Previously, I just felt like I was a big sack of HP. The turret didn't really work, and you just kind of like exposed the lower plate. And when you've got a weak turret and a weak lower plate, what can you do? Well, now, because you've got the turret armor on this tank, you've only really got to hide your lower plate. The upper hull isn't too bad. Be careful with this area, though, especially if your opponents get below you, that they're going to be able to shoot up into that part of your vehicle. And actually, I'd like to clarify that this flap along here is only 20 millimeters thick. And so if you're fighting one of these vehicles, overmatch it. But at least for now, until people don't learn about this, you might want to take one of these things out on the battlefield and give it another go. But as it becomes more popular, people are going to have to learn about these new weak points to deal with a fairly strong heavy tank. And the result, well, possibly the biggest game I've ever had in the VK4502A. This was a steel wall for the 3,730 damage that we blocked thanks to that new turret. This was a high caliber of 5,870 damage dealt thanks to the new damage per minute of the vehicle, and a Confederate as well for damaging 6 opponents that were subsequently killed by our allies. And the mother of all ace tankers at 1,947 base experience, while also still making a profit. So all in all, the VK4502A, is this now the new best tier 8 German heavy tank to play? No, not at all. Still, the VK is significantly outperforming it with huge hit points and just thick all-round armor. However, if you've ever wanted to dust off this vehicle in your garage and give it a go, then you might be surprised at how the new high damage per minute, good gun handling, reasonably well armored German heavy might perform. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you're watching this video as it's released on Sunday, it's time for the World of Tanks Tech Tree Showcase, live right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. And this week, the majority of you have voted for the BZ75. So come along and see one of the most brutal heavy tank lines in the game with some monster rockets attached to them. I'm going to start at tier 1, work my way up towards tier 10 so you can see if it's a line that's worth playing. So really looking forward to seeing you all live right now, and as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.